Formula One in Vegas seems to on paper be a match made in heaven, but at the moment, it's not going great. The Las Vegas Grand Prix has been hyped up by Formula One ever since it was officially announced to be happening, taking the iconic Las Vegas Strip and introducing the pinnacle of motorsport as a combination should work, but instead what we've seen is residents and fans annoyed by Formula One for blocking roads, covering windows and destroying businesses. Let's explore what led to the addition of the Vegas Grand Prix, why so many people are angry about it, and if there's any way that Formula One can save this weekend's race from disaster. In recent years, we've seen Formula One take a huge interest in increasing its fan base in general, with documentaries like Drive to Survive on Netflix, along with additional content on YouTube like Grill the Grid and highlights after each session. The gap between Formula One driver and the fans seems smaller than ever, and on top of that, the entry into becoming a Formula One fan and actually understanding what's going on up and down the paddock has never been easier, so more people than ever are having at least one driver that they like and follow, and are tuning into much more Formula One content than before. But the real goal of Formula One in and amongst this growth is building an American audience for the sport, as Formula One has always lacked American involvement in my opinion. Of course, there have been two American world champions in the past, Phil Hill and Mario Andretti won, but that was a long time ago now. Of course, we saw the introduction of an American team in Haas added to the grid in 2016, but also didn't really garner too much attention in America, and we've also seen an American driver added to the roster of 20 for the first time since Scott Speed, who left the grid in 2007, in the form of Logan Sargent this season, who hasn't been amazing, but Formula One has always struggled to build a real fan base in the States. I think one of the main reasons that Formula One and the US haven't clicked in the past is due to the cultural differences between European motorsport and American motorsport, as well as the motorsports that Formula One is now competing against on American soil. Formula One started in Europe, it developed itself around road circuits, and Formula One gained more popularity and importance in Europe to begin with. However, in America, they had their own forms of motorsport developing. They had NASCAR and later IndyCar, which paved their popularity in slightly different ways through the use of things like oval circuits. So if you take a look at old Formula One calendars, most of the Formula One races were in Europe, which is still the case today, whilst the majority of racing competitions in the United States were in their own country. That meant the majority of Formula One fans were European, and in contrast, most NASCAR and IndyCar fans were American, since they could go and see the racing closer to home, and the NASCAR and IndyCar races would be at much more accessible times of day, rather than the Formula One races, which Americans would have to wake up in the middle of the night to watch. So F1, realizing this over the last couple of seasons, has added more American Grand Prix to the calendar. We had COTA in Austin, and then Miami was added, and now this season we're headed to the Las Vegas Grand Prix, meaning that now we have 3 races based in the USA, along with Canada and Mexico in Northern America, which I think is a great idea. America is a massive country and should definitely have more than one Grand Prix. And most people agreed the addition of the Vegas Grand Prix for this season at first was met with a lot of praise. The drivers were really excited to see it added to the calendar, the locals were excited to see Formula One racing return to Vegas after so long, and I mean the spectacle of a night race under the lights of Vegas sounds like a dream. I am a massive fan of Singapore because we have that under the lights feel you get. Formula One just hits different when the cars are flying around at night, and this was set to be Singapore but on a next level. However, the addition of the Las Vegas Grand Prix now looks set to lose Formula One fans in America rather than garner new ones, and the stakes for the Las Vegas Grand Prix going well are ridiculously high. Not only does it have an impact on the fan base in America, as I've just mentioned, but Formula One already has a deal with Las Vegas to host this Grand Prix, initially for 3 years, but the plans are already in place to extend that contract to 10 years. If the first one goes terribly, they won't want to have 3 Grand Prix, let alone 10. And at the moment, everything surrounding Formula One's invasion of Las Vegas is pretty negative. Firstly, as I mentioned before, the track is along the Las Vegas Strip, and they've carefully arranged the street circuit around some of Las Vegas's biggest landmarks, which sounds amazing, but also it's quite a busy area to try and put in a Formula One track. When you build a city like Las Vegas around the Strip, You kinda need the Strip, which has meant that residents and tourists that have been trying to use the main road through Vegas have seen huge spikes in traffic causing massive delays, meaning people have had to commute an extra hour to and from their jobs every day, or have been unable to get to their local supermarket, in addition to the grandstands and temporary walkways causing chaos for everyone trying to get around on foot, whilst blocking the ability to view some of the most iconic parts of the city, as well as other roads just being closed completely, which has caused a huge loss in business for those franchises that rely on cars and people going past those areas. But maybe all that suffering will be worth it when you get to see the Grand Prix. Well, Formula One have made sure that any businesses or walkways that overlook the track have to either pay up to $2,000 for the window that overlooks the track to keep being a window for the weekend, or Formula One come around with an opaque tape and cover over the areas which look out onto the track, so that nobody can see any parts of the track for free. Now, I believe that at least restaurants and casinos have reached an agreement where this won't happen. They've paid a smaller fee than expected, but there are still plenty of places that are taped up completely. As you can imagine, this didn't go down incredibly well with locals because a lot of their tax money is going into making this event happen. So they just started peeling the tape off any walkways and windows that overlook the track, which to be fair I'd have probably done as well. So Formula One had to double down, and now a lot of these walkways have a combination of this tape covering the windows, as well as fences to stop anyone from getting to the tape and being able to peel it off, as well as a mesh cover above the walkways to stop anybody from peeking over the top of said windows. And there are even fences on the escalators near the track. Like, if there's anywhere where you could have got the slightest hint of Max Verstappen, it has now been completely covered over. In addition to the fences, a lot of these walkways will either be policed whilst the cars are out on track, or will just be closed completely whilst Formula One sessions are taking place, meaning that for 4 days between 5 PM and 4 AM across Wednesday, Thursday, Friday and Saturday, it's going to be basically impossible to get around Vegas. So now not only are the streets closed for the race weekend, obviously that's where the race is taking place, a lot of the surrounding businesses will now have to close too because they're inaccessible during these times. Now you'll probably notice that when I was listing the days, I didn't say Sunday. You know, that day where Formula One Grand Prix take place, and that's because to make this race happen, it won't actually take place on a Sunday, but instead will take place on Saturday night local time. And there are a couple of reasons for this. Firstly, if the race was on a Sunday night, then for European fans it would be on a Monday morning, so they're tailoring it to a European time zone, whilst trying to build an American audience and basically making it impossible to watch on the East Coast. And secondly, they don't want any of the sessions to clash with any other larger sporting events in America over the weekend, like the NFL, where there are rounds also taking place. On top of that, another reason why the timing of this is such a weird decision is because we could see the coldest Formula One race in history. At midnight in Vegas, at this time of year, the temperature can easily drop to 10 degrees C, if not lower. Now, the 1978 Canadian Grand Prix is the coldest ever race held, which had a peak temperature of just 5 degrees Celsius, and I don't think it will get that cold. I really hope it's not going to get that cold, but the temperatures will be low, and the tyres are really going to struggle, especially on a track that has no high-speed corners to really scrub the rubber against. So even if you are watching the Grand Prix, the racing might not be the best, and instead we might just see cars skating around, unable to really go for it. So overall, we have residents unhappy because they can't get around the city because Formula One is blocking roads and footways. Businesses are not happy because they're losing business and having to close down whilst people can't access them. Tourists unhappy because they won't be able to witness even the tiniest little bit of Formula One without paying an incredibly expensive ticket price. American fans unhappy because it's an awful time for them to watch. And other Formula One fans unhappy because the racing is likely to be terrible because it's too cold. It's not going amazingly. Now, I'm not saying that all hope is lost when it comes to Formula One working in Vegas. I do think it's a shame that a lot of local residents seem to be avoiding staying in Vegas for the Formula One weekend. The whole point was to bring the Grand Prix to them so that they could experience Formula One, but instead Formula One has killed a lot of the goodwill that the locals had over the construction of the circuit as well as the destruction of the city. But it can be salvaged. We see Formula One work in other cities. As I mentioned before, Singapore does it every year and it works. I saw a few locals to Singapore talking about how the Grand Prix works there, and they mentioned how a month or so before they start building the temporary grandstands without any real disruption to the surrounding areas, the traffic only gets affected for around 6 days, with detours to public transport routes put in place so you can skip over the areas near the Grand Prix, whilst bridges and walkways overlooking the track also get covered up in Singapore without imposing on businesses and buildings around the track too. And maybe this weekend we get to see an absolute classic. I'm very interested to see how the cars will actually be set up for this weekend, because we have the long straights but also the very twisty parts, almost similar to what we have in Baku, and then the track itself doesn't look terrible for overtaking opportunities. I'm a little bit skeptical about turn 3 and turn 7 and 8. I think they may slow down the cars and spread them out a little bit too much through those sections for overtaking maneuvers to really happen into turn 5 or turn 12, but we have an insanely long straight from turn 12 through 13 down into 14, which is going to be an incredibly hard braking zone where we could see some moves, especially with the DRS helping the drivers out there as well. I think once we see the cars out on track, the spectacle of seeing the Formula 1 grid at full speed tackling a street circuit in front of some of the most iconic places in the US, the cars and helmets of your favorite drivers beautifully sparkling under the lights of the Vegas Strip, means that we'll all just forget about the problems that we have just for an hour or two before something goes wrong either on or off track that brings us all back down from that place of euphoria, smashing back down to earth again in true Formula 1 fashion. It does feel like at the moment Formula 1 haven't really understood the assignment when it comes to putting together a race in Vegas to galvanize a new American fan base and build goodwill in that area. Going about annoying literally everybody who lives and works in Vegas maybe isn't the best way to go about it, or by having the race at a time which suits a European time zone more than an American time zone, but it's their first attempt at putting together a modern day Formula 1 race in Vegas, and there are always going to be teething problems. I just really hope they've learned a lot of valuable lessons when setting up this first time, so that in the future races in 2024 and beyond, they have a much smaller impact on the city and its residents. I love Formula 1, it's given me a lot over the course of my life, and I want to see it succeed, and I hope that I'm proven completely wrong, and when we get to the race itself, everything goes incredibly well and it all works seamlessly. But as someone that's followed Formula 1 for a while, I've also seen that they don't often get things right on their first try. But I'd absolutely love to know what you think. Let me know your thoughts on the Las Vegas Grand Prix in the comments down below. Are you looking forward to it? Do you think it's going to be an absolute disaster? And if you have enjoyed this video, I made a video here about Lando Norris and his recent self-criticism. So click that link and I'll see you over there.